Hey truckers, Tom here. We're going to look at my 2019 trip to Hot Springs National Park. So this trip to Hot Springs was in 16 March to 17 March in 2019. The initial intent was to do a proper backpacking trip with lighter gear. We went in the wintertime, not even early spring yet, so leaves were still absent. I'm sure it would have been more lovely in the autumn or the springtime, but we still made it work. The views were definitely more visible with the lack of leaves as opposed to going during the summertime. We originally wanted to stay in the Arlington Hotel in downtown Hot Springs for the first night in town. That would have given us a chance to check out the town, to include the bathhouses. Then after that, we would do the backpacking portion. But reservations for the hotel filled up fast, and we never got to check out the hotel. We did end up staying in a Red Roof Inn further out in town. The plan for this trip was to park our car at the trailhead point on Black Snake Road. From there, we would take the Sunset Trail on the Sugarloaf Mountain clockwise and loop around to the Gulp to Gorge campground and spend the night. The next day, we'd finish the rest of our loop through Dead Chief's Trail, cut through downtown, at the same time check out the bathhouses and complete our journey back to Sunset Trail. The reason we went clockwise versus counterclockwise was to give us adequate time to complete the trail. The trail going clockwise to the campground was longer the first day than it would be the second day. Personally, I'd rather do longer days first, knock out the difficult stuff in the beginning, and then the rest would just kind of be a breeze. Having Arlo along on the trip, we don't want to overwork him on the trails. First note I want to make is this trip I started out being ill. I may have had the cold the first day, but ended up heavily congested with a migraine, and I lost my ability to smell on the second day. This was apparent when Arlo pooped at the campsite and we were packing up, and I unknowingly stepped in it, but I didn't even smell it. We had this trip planned for months, and I wasn't going to let a little sickness slow us down. Second, I want to note that this was our first trip using all our backpacking gear. The past trips were kind of a mix and match of gear and equipment, but for this one we had new gear and I was stoked that it was becoming a reality. Plus the gear was a lot lighter than the past trips. Arlo had his own pack, a saddlebag that was connected to his harness, and he carried his own food and water and any poop bag that he may have done on the trail. After camping that night, we went our way into town. We got to see some interesting things along the trail. One of them was signs of landslides or rocks tumbling down the hills. We seen a bent fence, and one building looked like a giant boulder smashed onto the roof. When we got closer into town, we saw some interesting structures. One of them looked like a World War II flak tower. I'm not sure what it was, but that's what it looked like to me. When we got into town, there were sections that looked like flooding. Apparently these were natural springs in the area. The hills kind of leak waters, which is why all these bathhouses were constructed in the first place. They're natural springs. Did I mention it was visually apparent of St. Paddy's Day? Everyone was sporting green, and there was large numbers of drunk people and college kids strolling around. That didn't hinder us from exploring, and we were able to check out the bathhouse in shifts. Pets aren't allowed inside, so one of us had to stay outside with Arlo while the other took turn looking around the building. After all the excitement from the downtown area, we headed back to the trail and made our way back to the car. The climb was steeper, but less enduring if we went the other way. After we got to the car, we didn't want to bother trying to book a night in a hotel, so we just hit the road. Nikki got some sleep in the car, and we drove in shifts. Lessons learned. Okay, here we go. Right off the bat, not even 10 minutes into our trek from the car, we had some water issues. The issues being the water reservoir hose in both our packs was getting crimped by the H2O hole on the top of the pack. I ended up having to wedge a stick in there to unpinch the line, but there's a permanent crease in the line that will fold over on itself every time it goes to that opening. Another lesson is proper planning with holiday weekends. For some odd reason, I completely forgot it was St. Paddy's Day weekend. Nikki didn't forget because she ended up packing some whiskey shooters for us to mix with our coffee. But that explains the lack of hotel rooms available and other issues we came across. I made an account on reservation.gov several months back. This website is associated with federal parks, forests, and lands for reserving camp locations. There was no availability to reserve this location at the campground in Hot Springs. It was listed as a first-come, first-served basis. I wasn't sure if there was a kiosk or a ranger station on site. But when we finally arrived to the campground, it was completely booked up. The payment station was done via electronic kiosk, and every spot was designated for a camper or a car. There were some grassy areas away from the campground with some picnic benches, but they were for day use only. In fact, there were signs that said no camping. I looked it up and there were some primitive camping sections there for tenors a few years ago, but I guess they removed it. Probably to help protect the grassy areas. We ended up asking another family in a camper if we can camp next to them on the grass. We offered some money to split the site and that worked out. We had a dog and they were a little worried that Arlo might bark and wake up their baby, but he was quiet for the trip. I will say that it was a shame that there are limited spots at the campground, and for tenters hiking in or random trips for people that want to go, it's kind of a gamble to see if you'll even get a spot. But luckily we had some luck with other people willing to help us out. Another lesson learned was the excess gear. Again, I brought the bear canister for containing our food. There wasn't any issues with bears or wildlife on the campgrounds that where we were camping, but I brought the can regardless. I think it was more for training purposes and the ability to pack with all my stuff with the can. I probably should have just used the food bag and saved myself the extra pounds, but I wanted to carry it. The campground did have running water, so I didn't need to bring any filtration system, but I did bring it even in the event that we did need more water while on the trail. It was chilly out, so that wasn't an issue with sweating out water. A micro problem we had before we even left was with Arlo's harness. It was still pretty new to him and he didn't wear it all the time, but he chewed off the front clip right near his chest, so it wouldn't stay balanced when he wore it. This happened the night before we left. So I had to think quick. I had some Gorilla Glue and glued the fabric back together, and additionally I sewed through it the straps as well. I spent a few hours making it nice and tight because I didn't want that thing coming loose and failing while we were on the trail. Overall, this trip was a lot of fun. I'd like to try this trip again sometime, maybe a different time of year, say autumn or spring, when there's more colors in the trees. This trip was pretty easy, and although the trip had a rocky start with the gear and battling a cold, we still had a great time. Like always, thanks for watching and enjoy the trails.